I'm Ramisha. I'm like in charge of the project. Everybody introduce yourselves.
I'm William. Jeremiah.
I'm Natasha.
Ian.
It's nice to meet you.
Nice to see all your faces.
Thank you for sitting down and talking to us. We have a few questions. Who wants to start?
Okay.
Ian.
Okay. Go ahead, Ian.
All right, Chelsey. What person or event from the Harlem Renaissance has inspired your independent poetic expression the most, and where is this most expressive in your work academically and socially?
Oh wow, that's a lot.
That's a big question. I think that the person who probably has, did you say inspired or influenced? I guess it doesn't make a difference.
Inspired, yeah.
I think that it would probably be James Baldwin, because he was very, very outspoken. And you know, he was actually a homosexual man he was born in the 20s.
Oh wow.
And to be open with your orientation at that time would have been really extreme. I don't know how open he was early on, but he wrote this book called Giovanni's Room. And he actually, have any of you had a chance to read it at all?
Mm-mm.
No? Well, first of all, the writing is just beautiful. But on top of that, he writes from the perspective of a white male.
Oh.
And he tells his story. So he, instead of speaking openly about himself, it's like he tells this story about a man who goes to France, which is what he really did in his lifetime, and falls in love with another man. It's very risque. but the way that I would identify with him in my writing is that I consider myself to be very outspoken, and I try to put myself in situations that are somewhat challenging. Maybe not just like his situation, but I don't know if that makes sense.
No, yeah.
I'm trying.
Solid response.
That was a tough question.
All right, and then my second question. Has a particular poet or poem from the National Poetry Team inspired your work? If so, what dynamics from their work have inspired your own creative thinking, and where is this reflected?
I know, wow.
It's like a 4-part question. It's great, though. Don't be embarrassed. Well, there are lots of poets that have inspired me. There's a woman by the name of Karen Finney Frock. She works in schools through a program called Writers in the Schools, and she has written young adult novels and lots of poetry and done lots of poetry work. She's just the way that she writes is just beautiful, and her performance is equally beautiful. And she's just someone that I've always looked up to and appreciated watching. There's another person who actually, now that I think about it, I think, Romisha, you asked me a question last time we talked about who in spoken word inspired me, or was there anyone that took me under my wing?
Uh-huh.
And actually, there's a guy, a gentleman by the name of Rajni Edens, and he started writing, I think, at a very young age, and was a part of the poetry scene here in Seattle. He's the person who actually brought me to my first poetry slam.
Oh, wow.
And became a really good friend of mine. So he's also someone that I really look up to. What was the other part of your question?
The other part of my question was, is there someone in particular from the national poetry team that's inspired you? And how has that influenced your creative thinking?
I think that just being around any poet, being around any form of creative expression influences me, to be honest with you, whether it be music or poetry or dancing. I'm inspired, and I'm inspired when the wind blows. If that answers your question.
All right, yeah, perfect.
I can't be very particular about it because I can't just sit here. I would be lying to you if I said, oh yeah, this particular person and their particular poem inspired me in this way. It would be a lie. So I'm not going to do it.
Okay, and then my third question. Has Otis or any bands, songs or musicians from the Roland or the Round, do you know what I'm talking about? In Seattle. Has that transcended positive self-esteem into your work? And how's that influenced your intellectual poetic leadership?
Another 4-part question.
Yeah.
8-point question.
I'll just try to tackle the first part. So I was a part of a show called Round 85 with a gentleman that I work with named Benjamin Verdos, who is a part of a band called the Mount St. Helens Band.
Yeah.
And the one who brought me into this show. It's an event that happens, I think it's like every 3 or 4 months they have a round, and so if you can imagine, there were lots of rounds before me, and so that's why it's called Round 85.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a round of artists who perform, and so Otis was there, and that was my first time seeing him. I was definitely inspired by him because he was really quick and honest with his audience and very talented. He sang a little bit, but you could tell that he really wasn't a singer. It was just something that he added into his work. And as a performer, it's just I can really appreciate able to watch people do whatever spot without really looking like they. I think it was his first time actually performing, so he didn't seem like he was nervous or scared about performing these pieces. The second part, poetic expression. What was that?
You don't have to answer that, but how has that influenced your poetic leadership? If it has.
I don't know. That show and those particular bands, they were people that I had just met that night. How it maybe affected my poetic leadership might be that I was one of the only poets there, and so I had to really show and stand out for the audience, and I guess that was a way to show leadership. I don't.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Chelsey.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Natasha, you want to go?
Okay, I'll go next. I have 3 questions for you. Oh. Excuse me again.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. The first one is, why were you drawn to performance poetry compared to other writing mediums?
I think that it was something that I really wanted to challenge myself with, because I always wrote, but I didn't write and perform. And I think one of the first poets that I saw actually perform on TV was, I think she was at the Apollo or something like that, and I was in maybe 8th grade, or maybe I was a little bit older, but I thought to myself I could never do that. And then I had finally worked up the nerve to do it years later, but that I considered a challenge that, you know, that I could conquer a fear. So I just took it on. But it wasn't that I thought, oh, I honestly didn't think I would be all that good at it. I just wanted to try it.
Yeah. Okay. Second question is, how do you find inspiration and how do you work through your writer's block?
Writer's block is really hard. Sometimes I don't work through it, to be honest. Sometimes I don't write. Sometimes I just accept that I'm not writing. And that's sort of the way that I deal with it. I don't know if that's good or beneficial to my work or my artistry. It probably isn't. But it does seem like sometimes when I take a short break that I end up writing something that was better than the last thing that I wrote, which is how it should be. But what was the beginning?
How do you find inspiration?
Actually, you know, it's funny because Mr. Cash is someone that told me once that I was one of those writers that just liked to be inspired and just write when I was inspired, and he was kind of right about that. And I see that as a downfall for me. What I have tried to do is try to work on being less concerned about being inspired, because that's sort of what happens when I take a break. I might be going through something, you know, just like all of us do. I might be experiencing depression or anxiety or something that's going on in my life, and so I kind of let go for a while. And so I try to pull things from what's going on in the media or what's happening in our lives, what's happening socially, and I try to examine those things and try to write poetry about them. And so that would be a little bit of inspiration for me.
Okay. And my last question is, how do you know when a poem is finished, or how do you keep from overworking a piece?
I only know a poem is finished when I get to a point where I've said everything that I need to say about whatever the topic is. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said before, that there are things that I pull out, you know, out of media or things that are going on around us in the world. And you know how you have an idea about something or an opinion, and if you're in the middle of a heated argument with someone and you want to say everything that you need to say to prove every point that you have on that topic, you're going to say everything you need to say, right? And so that's how I know my poem is done. And overworking a poem, I sort of don't think that's possible, because there have been times that I have gone back to a poem that I wrote years ago and actually edited and changed it. And I think that any form of art is a constant working piece. And so I think that that I can always go back and change something.
That's great. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
All right, I guess I can go next. You kind of answered one of my questions with your last response. It was, have you ever went to an unfinished piece and kind of edited it, or do you just write poems and as they come, and if you don't finish it, it's unfinished, and you kind of answer that? So my other two questions are, some of the figures that we've studied in our African American writers class say that true poets are dedicated to their craft and they only work in poetry, whether it's teaching poetry, editing poetry, things like that. So do you believe that a true poet is one solely based in the field, or poets can have other interests as well?
I think poets have to have other interests.
Well, I guess not interests, but other career aspirations, different career aspirations, I guess.
I don't know. I think that if someone does, I could see how I could understand that statement, because as I was saying earlier, if I'm dealing with something, sometimes it's hard to write, or if I'm doing something, going through something difficult, because I see that as a downfall, as for myself as an artist. And so I do think that being totally immersed into your art is very important, and that I guess to be a true poet, you would have to be completely involved in every way possible, so that you can continue, to become a better poet. And that's something that's been a continuous challenge for me in my work, that I always find myself, saying, I can do better at this, or I should be working harder to write better, and to be a better overall person and to be a better artist.
Okay. And my next question is another or some of the poets that we also study, like Langston Hughes, kind of believe that a poet's true purpose can't really be described or found out when you're first sitting down to write it. It's kind of like figured out after the poem's said and done, and after you finished it, and kind of, as you said all you can say. So do you share that belief that a poem is really kind of unknown what it'll be used for until it's actually finished?
Okay, wait, sorry. Sure, if I understand. So do I believe that a poem, that you never know the purpose of a poem until you sit down?
Yeah, until you either sit down and write it, or you are finished with the poem, and that's when you know the purpose.
I totally agree with that. Yeah. Because there are days when I sit down and I write, and I'm not inspired to write, but I'm just sitting down to do something, to get it out, to write a bad poem so that I know that I'm practicing or whatever. And then I end up writing something and I think, oh, okay, I can use that. And it could be a simple line. I can't think of anything right now in particular, but it could be a simple line, and then I decide to do something and work with it, and then it becomes a poem that I really didn't expect to come out of me.
Thank you.
And I didn't plan it.
Am I next?
Yep.
Alright. I'm Jeremiah. Let's see here. Okay, first question. What is your creative process for your poems?
They all work. It works differently every time I sit down to write. But what I like to do is start out writing. That's the very first step. just write. And like I just said, expect that I might write something that's really bad. And then I decide whether or not I want to use it. I decide by looking at different lines, if there are any that I can just pull out and try and use it as a prompt to write another poem. And then I go from there. I end up writing probably a full piece, and then I look at it and I pull out, I pull out more parts of it that I think I can either get rid of or I can use. Until I finally comfortable with whatever it is that I've written. And then I actually start trying to memorize it. And the memorization process is just that I start reading it to myself when I'm in my car driving to work, or I say it out loud to myself in the mirror. Then where I got careful what poems I practice in front of her, the content, and make sure that they're appropriate, because she will repeat them. But that's the general process, and it doesn't always work that way. That's the way I like for it to work. But sometimes I have a thought that just pops into my head, and I need to hurry up and write it down, and I use that as a prompt. But it all depends, really.
Okay. Okay. My second question is, what is the audience that the majority of your poems are directed towards?
You kind of froze there for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. What is the audience that the majority of your poems are directed towards?
Majority of my poems are written for people of color, but they are also evoke emotion in everyone. I try to, when I say they're written for people of color, I think that because I like to write about issues dealing with race, that people of color usually, not always, but usually can identify and understand those right away and right off the bat. But I like to also make sure that, or at least hope that other people can identify and understand those by making them somewhat universal, by building situations around race that everyone can relate to.
Okay. And my last question has 2 parts. In your poem, A Portrait of a Painter, where did you get the inspiration for it? And the second part is, and in the last line, what did you mean when you said, his brush leaving paint where love was leaving love in its place? Sorry, that's too much.
Oh, no. That's actually a true story.
See, I was afraid of that when I read it, but like I was curious.
Yeah, the inspiration is from actually one of my very.
Great job.
I'm sorry if I'm embarrassing you.
No, it's okay. I'm kind of embarrassed, but I wrote it, and so I shouldn't be able to talk about it. Right? But yes, I was actually in a relationship with my daughter's dad, who was in a relationship with another woman, and that poem is about that situation. In the dream, there were lots of eyes I didn't know at first, and that last line, can you read it to me again? Because I think I can try and explain what I meant by it.
It says, his brush leaving paint where love was leaving love in its place.
You tell me what that line means.
Oh, I've really dumbed down that. Wait a second.
I think what I was trying to say was that.
I'm sorry.
What?
Actually, never mind. It kind of.
It's not graphic.
Oh, okay.
Is it kind of like?
It's not meant.
Is it kind of like talking about leaving a mess behind? Because paint, it's kind of hard and difficult to clean up.
Yeah, it is. It's also, it's about leaving a mess behind, but it's also about never actually sharing real love with anyone. So he left love in its place where it couldn't be shared with me or the other person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
For that poem up. No, I appreciate it. Sometimes I forget what stuff is online, So it's actually kind of cool that you asked me about that.
My first question is, what is your oldest experience with poetry? Like when were you first introduced to poetry?
I know that I was introduced to poetry really, really early because my mom was an English teacher. But, and also I was raised Catholic, and I don't know how many of you had to go to church when you were little, but the Bible is poetry. this very poetic language that's used in the Bible. And I went to private school and I spent a lot of time reading and discovering and learning about the Bible. Aside from that, 7th grade, I was supposed to write a set of poems and come up with a portfolio of poetry. And I didn't even know that I liked it as much as I did, but it turned out to be a really great form of expression for me. And that was probably the first time that I was exposed to it. I started reading poems from Emily Dickinson and who else can I think of that I read at that time? I just read a lot of random stuff that I can't really remember, but that was probably the first time that I was really exposed to it, 7th grade.
Okay. My second question is, do you feel being a mother enhances your writing?
Yes. I think that being a mother enhances my writing because I'm forced to look at the world. As I was telling Romisha in our last interview, I'm forced to look at the world through her eyes and try and see what the challenges are that she's going to face, and to be able to look in hindsight and look at the things that I've already dealt with. And so I really examine the world through different eyes now that I have a child.
Okay. And my last question, what is the greatest lesson that you've learned that you would like to pass on to your daughter? Whether it's about life, friendships, love.
The biggest lesson, I think, would probably be that we all make mistakes, and that it's really not the mistake that counts, it's what you do afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Things are important.
Yeah. Thank you.
Perfect. I think that's all the questions we have. We do have a couple extra questions about when you come to visit. So
okay.
About like socials and that kind of thing. If anybody who's doing social wants to ask questions about that.
Just
Where'd
like
everybody go?
what?
Sorry?
Where'd everybody go?
I know.
We're all ready.
They're hiding.
Well, I'm just like setting up nightlife, social, anything like that. So just like if you could give us like your particular interests or anything that you may have heard about that you want us to kind of look forward to ahead of time, any museums. Professor Cash told us you're interested in basketball, so we're trying to look for tickets to OSU games. But anything else that you can add would be very appreciated.
He told you I'm interested in basketball.
He said you might be interested. That's what he said.
I like basketball, but that's not like he's interested in basketball.
Okay, that makes sense.
No, a basketball game would be fun. I really honestly have no idea. I haven't thought a lot about it because I'm kind of leaving it up to you guys.
Okay, well, is there anything you specifically just don't think you would enjoy that much? Any kind of cuisine, any museum, art, music?
I love food. I
agree with that.
I would love to try like your best, like what you guys would consider, your best restaurants out there. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like most fancy or most expensive, just like the best food. Where do you guys go that you really love? I don't want you to take me to the school cafeteria.
Oh no.
Absolutely not. That's more expensive than the other places.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it would be interesting to kind of go through some of the historical neighborhoods or places like that. Museums are great. I really would like, I'm just really excited to get to know you guys. So whatever you guys plan, I'm sure will be great.
And also, we're doing a group for the marketing and flyers. Do you have an idea of what you're going to do for one of your lectures that you're going to be doing for Professor Cash?
I think that I'll probably be doing a little bit of a lecture on hip hop and influence of hip hop on my poetry and on art in general.
And
I have to do more planning.
Okay.
with the week we have scheduled, we have just full day for you on Tuesday and Thursday. And we were just kind of plan a day where you would go out into the community, like schools or anything like that. Do you have a day preference? Because is it Wednesday to the lecture and then Friday is the huge event? So we just wanted to get your opinion, like which day would work best for you. Which day would you just want to have completely off, like nothing in the books?
So Wednesday's a lecture. Maybe Tuesday.
Okay.
Did you say Tuesday and Thursday?
Yeah, we either have Tuesday or Thursday open. Wednesday's the lecture, and then Friday's the huge event that you're doing. So we just didn't know.
Yeah, maybe Tuesday. Get ready for the lecture.
Okay.
Anybody else have any questions?
Now, Professor Cash told us that you want to do a work. She wants to do a workshop.
Yeah.
And is that going to be at one of the schools that she goes to visit?
The workshop is
No, it's
Monday
separate.
for the Black Women Writers class.
Okay. But you do
But
want.
if they want to do a workshop at a school, if that's possible.
Yeah.
What exactly did you want to do at the school with the? I know you don't have a preference on like the age of those students necessarily.
I just think it would be cool to do some kind of spoken word or writing workshop.
Okay.
Just like doing that.
Yeah. Okay.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, well, thank you so much, Chelsey, for sitting down and talking to us. We're racing. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye.
Bye.